and just kind of moderate this discussion a little bit, but I'm going to pass the microphone off to these guys. So free-flowing conversation here. I'm going to ask a question. It's going to pop up on the screen. And for you guys, feel free to look at each other. It doesn't have to be sequential, but as you guys have something that you'd like to release to the room, feel free to do that, okay? So I'll start it in your hands, sir. And if you'll just take a moment to introduce yourself briefly, how long you've been a part of CBMC, and what your daytime is.
I will. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
You said this is generation. I'm a retiree, in case you might be confused. I have been a part of CBMC for 43 years. But to get back first for me, my family, I've got 5 children. I've got 3 here on earth and 2 in heaven. Peggy and I were married for 59 years. We lost her 3 years ago after her 7-year battle with dementia. So one of the question was, how do you spend your time? My time since then has been reoriented, but it's been an opportunity to get back in the marketplace. But I had a 31-year career with the Ford Motor Company. They moved us around a lot, and it was a good career. I've been retired longer than I worked, so I feel fortunate with that. I spend my time involved in my community. I'm in an HOA community, condominium community. We downsized for Peggy. And it's one thing I advise you not to do as you get older, is to get on an HOA board. If you do that. But I met her, a young man out of Ohio State. We get together, and that is a blessing for me. I'm involved in my community. I lead a Bible study in our association. I enjoy the game of golf. I'm able to stay active that way. My connection with CBMC goes back to when Peggy and I married. Neither one of us, we were attending church occasionally doing that, but we never put our trust and faith in God. And my goal was to get in the marketplace and conquer the world of carts and trucks at the Ford Motor Company and just live the good life. And came to faith, actually. We adopted a couple of children, and some people invited them to come to their church. So that got Peggy and I back into church. And one Sunday, a man was a guest speaker at our church, and he shared the gospel, and I came to Christ through that event. But what was happening at that time was my career was accelerating, and I was moved 7 times in 10 years. So I really wasn't growing in my faith. It wasn't until 1983 that we settled in Detroit finally for the last time. And I was given a position at Lincoln Mercury, and I found out there were some CBMCers working for me. I didn't know what that was all about, and they invited me to an outreach. And it was throughout that outreach that I found CBMC and been a part of it since then.
Thanks, good.
I'm Chris Scowden. I am FBA operators. If you don't know what that means, it's all right, because the guy I work with made it up. So what we do is basically we're financial operational advisory for family-owned, privately owned businesses. So we help them get clarity over their financial and operational data, and then we help them use that data to drive business decisions, improve processes, just basically make their lives easier and help their businesses grow faster. I was lagging behind Mike, I think, for about a month. I started in CBMC back in November. I think it was my first month, my first coffee connection. I was introduced to it 2 years ago by that tall drink of water back there. He sent me a text and said, hey, there's this cool thing, you should come to it with me. And he drove all the way over from Utica to come to it, and it was 5 minutes down the road from my house, and I said, nah, I'm too busy for that. But 2 years later, the situation I ended up in, I was invited, and it's been great for the last 9 months.
Thanks, Chris.
Good morning. Jordan Acker. I am a father of 8 with 1 on the way. I have been part of the area leadership team since Jared invited me to be a part of that last year. CBMC, I got connected to Jared actually about 8 or 9 years ago through CBMC Cleveland. So there was no CBMC here in Columbus. And I was a part of a group called Iron Sharpens Iron, which runs 24-hour men's retreats twice a year. And the guys in Cleveland that also do Iron Sharpens Iron were involved with CBMC. So they connected Jared and I, and kind of the rest is history. Been part of it since its kind of relaunch here in Columbus. Wealth management firm that I own and operate.
Love it. So who wants to kick us off with this question? In what ways has CBMC most impacted or sharpened you as a man of God?
I'll take it. When you got the question, I thought of 2 things. First of all, it greatly accelerated my spiritual growth. And secondly, I found that God had a purpose for my life. It was when I came to faith through that man that spoke at our church, his main message was on, do you know you're a sinner? And God began to open to me that day, the sin that I saw in my life I hadn't seen before. And I realized that, and when I came to Christ, the main focus for me was to get a pass out of hell. That's what I was looking for. And I found that forgiveness. But what I found out more through my spiritual growth was that God has a purpose for our lives. It's much more. There's so much more, to being in Christ and the cross and all of that. So CBMC really accelerated my understanding of that. I told you that the men in my working for me invited me to a CBMC outreach. The speaker was Brad Pryor. He was general sales manager at Cadillac. And he told me that he was going to speak about Cadillac. They were designing their new cars. He was going to talk about that. And of course, being in the industry at Lincoln Mercury Ford there, I had an interest in that. And then they said he'd share about his life. And Brad Pryor did talk about Cadillac and show some pictures and all that. And then he shared his testimony and talked about the importance of Christ. And I thought, well, I have done that when he prayed the prayer, But he said something more at the end of that. He said, he held up a Cadillac owner's manual. And he said, this is our owner's manual. Cadillac, we're the creator. And in here we have all the instructions for how to treat your car, how to extend the life of your car, how to care for it. When trouble comes, how to react to it, what to do, and all of that. And he said, most people, we advise people to read, please read it and be ready and understand and treat the car the way it's supposed to be. He said, most people put it in their glove box and never look at it until they have trouble. And I do that with my Ford. Today they don't have manuals anymore, you get them on the internet. But he held up his Bible and he said, fellas, this is our owner's manual. And he said, God is our creator, and this is how we're supposed to lead our life. And talked about the Bible and all of that, and to keep us out of trouble, what to do in trouble and all of that. And he said, we shouldn't put it in the glove box, we need to be in it every day. He talked about the importance of staying in the Word every day. And then he said, CBMC has a program called Operation Timothy, where another man will take you through the Bible and all the facets of your life and give you focus for all those. And I encourage you to do that. So when they came around with the card at the end of the day, I marked the card, give me a call. I want to know more about Operation Timothy. A week later, the Metro Director of Detroit called me, and my secretary walked into my office, and she said, there's some guy on the phone by the name of Fred, and he says he's with some religious organization, and he wants to talk to you. Are you in a religious organization? God knows she was not a believer. So I said, I attended the event, let me talk to him. So Fred said, hey Dick, just checking up, talking Operation Timothy, how would you like to get started? And I'm thinking, this is too fast for me. Fred, look at my schedule. I'll have to get back to you. And God really put on my heart, you need this. So I called Fred back, and Operation Timothy was a 12-week study at that time, and it took us 18 months to get through it because he was life on life. We just didn't read the thing and check the boxes and move on. and it just changed my life. So my spiritual growth and my purpose were really two big events for me, and what CBMC has helped me to define.
Yeah, so it's funny because I can echo a lot of things that he said. My spiritual growth is, I like to say that it's like if you see a bead moving along a timeline, right, or a scale. 10 years, my faith kept growing little by little, and then over the last 9 months, it's like it shot way out that way, just up and to the right the whole time. So, and the biggest difference in that is being surrounded by men and being in that community where these guys live out their faith daily. And it's not just, when you have coffee with them and they pray, or you see them, in the store and they say, hey, how you doing? It's like they do it in their contracts and their interactions with their clients. Everything they do at work. And so I actually wrote down Ray Belfridge, where the second CBMC event I was at. I think the first one you said, hey, I've got to introduce you to Ray. And I met with him, and he said something to me that Mike just said, and I'll reiterate. We always spread the gospel, and sometimes we use words. And another thing that he said to me was, I want people to look at me and say that there's something different about me. So when I walk into the room, my client knows, hey, Ray is here, Chris is here, Mike's here, whoever. And we're glad that he's here because there's something different about that guy. And then yesterday, that was the beginning of my journey with CBMC, and just yesterday, Brent Long spoke at the Polaris Coffee Connection. And then he and I had coffee afterwards, and he said, he was telling me about when he coached middle school football, and he told his boys, he said, everything that we do is worship. So the way we practice, the way we play, the way we walk down the hallway, talk to our teachers, talk to our parents, everything we do is worship. And that's something that I've seen at play in CBMC, the workplace, like being out here. And I spent 10 years in a corporate career where that stuff just isn't really allowed, right? Like you have HR to talk to if you start talking about Jesus at work. So, so really like that timeline is like I spent 10 years with kind of a separation and compartmentalization of church was Sunday, work was work, and none of it should touch each other. But that I always lean on John chapter 9, verse 25, where the blind man was healed, and he says, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. All I do know is I was blind, and now I see. And that CBMC really just opened my eyes to a different way of living and a better way to live out every day.
I'd say some of the impact has been the people that I've met. So just being around, you are who you are around, who you're influenced by. And so just being around guys who are trying to live out their faith in the marketplace has been super encouraging. I've been a part of the Trusted Advisors Forum for 3 years. It's a group that meets on a monthly basis for business owners and C-suite individuals. And having that spiritual board of advisors to help me through challenges in my business has been a huge blessing.
So this dovetails a little bit with where Jordan was already at there. How have you been changed as a result of the new relationships that you have and currently are making through CBMC? Obviously, the kingdom of God advances at the speed of our relationships, right? And so I'd be curious just to hear your reflections on that.
Well, relationships are important. I think we're created for community, and I certainly find that CBMC has been mentioned. I've been blessed by God to be able to speak at 70 outreaches across the country and whatever, and as I connect with CBMCers there, I mean, it's immediate community, and it's just a blessing to be with like-minded men, that come together for the same purpose, and there's a safety there. My first relationship, when I saw the word relationship there, my first relationship was with my mentor. And he's still alive and still my mentor today, 43 years later. But I began to realize the value of a mentor. And I don't know if any of you have gotten involved in the Timothy opportunity, but he was my Paul and I was his Timothy, and I just learned that I could trust him, and I found I could trust CBMC, you can trust the process, and the men, their safety there. The value of a mentor is just makes a difference. And if you haven't involved yourself in Operation Timothy or study another guy in accountability, I would encourage you to do that. The other thing that my relationship changed was, as a guy, I don't know if I'm unusual, but I'm kind of guarded when it comes to accountability and what I'm willing to share with another man. And
You're guarded?
I'm guarded, you know, it's something I
You're
don't.
very unusual, for sure.
I don't do it easily. And I found that through my mentor Fred and others, you know, I can trust them. And again, that is comforting to me to know that, and for them to share with me and know that you know what we're going through is mutual. So that was important. The other thing is what happened for me, what changed for me, being around other CBMCers and the coffee connection that I find that they're doing here now is really neat because I see it at work where you hear another man's testimony or whatever. My view through my mentor and my discipling, Operation Timothy, and talking to connecting with other men, my view of the marketplace changed. Again, my first 12 years of my career, I was out. The marketplace meant treasure. It was where I could find my fortune. I worked hard, you know, I was building, accumulating materials and all of that. And I began to realize, again, finding a purpose in my life, 2 Corinthians 5:20, you're ambassadors for Christ. And that just struck me. And that's where I found my purpose. And my view of the marketplace changed. Instead of finding my treasures there, material things in the world, I found it as a place, as a mission field. And I began to change my view and be more in my outreach and openness to others about Christ and sharing. So those two things were important to me that way.
I have a joke. Actually, one of my favorite jokes is about Jesus. We're talking about relationships, but you know, his greatest miracle was not raising someone from the dead. It was not turning water into wine. It was having 12 close friends. You know, to your point, Dick, I mean, it's hard to open up with other people. So having one of my mentors always said there's kind of two, and two. Having two people you can look up to. It might be your father, it might be a mentor, a spiritual mentor, or somebody. Two people that are a stage ahead of you in life. Two people that are walking through life with you, kind of peers, and then two people that you're pouring into. I think oftentimes we miss that pouring into. We're so self-focused that you know we don't realize what we've been given, and so we're not giving on the other side of that relationships. But yeah, relationships to me, I mean, the first thing I thought about was just my relationship with God first, with my family, and then with others. So CBMC relationships are important, but they're in that other category. A mentor of mine told me, if you prioritize your relationship with God first, your spouse and your family, and then others, you'll be successful wherever you go. But I noticed that with the CBMC group that many men are prioritizing that relationship with God first.
That's good. That's good.
I think these guys copied my notes.
Same Holy Spirit this week.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
That's all it is. Yeah, so what Dick said about the mentorship and Jordan too, the two words that came to mind when I was thinking about this question were accountability and motivation, and I mean both of those in very specific ways. Because on the accountability side, I got a new mentor and my, I guess, business partner / boss / whatever, Tim. We're not putting labels on it just yet. So he holds me accountable in my performance, my learning, like how I'm growing on the business side of things. But along with him, I've got 100 new mentors around CBMC that, like I said on the first question, like in their faith and their demeanor and the way they talk to people, the way they conduct their business and interact, it's that like I'm learning so much from them. And I don't think I hope they know that they're teaching me, but I'm like, I don't say it, right? I'm not walking up there and saying, hey, you're my mentor. But I'm listening and I'm learning to all these guys, and it's just a room full. If you guys go to the Polaris Coffee Connection, it's probably 100 guys in there. And I'm just listening to all of them, whether they're older than me, younger than me. One of my favorite guys that I met doing jiu-jitsu, and then we found out we go to the same church, and I invited him to CBMC, but the 25-year-old kid, like pretty fresh out of college, still trying to figure out what he wants to do, but the way that he talks and the way that he openly lives his faith and talks about the Lord and where the Lord's calling him is not a way that I've ever spoken before. And so when I look at him, I think, he's almost a decade and a half younger than me, but he has so much more spiritual maturity, I guess, than I have even at this age. So I say that to say, your mentors don't have to necessarily be older. Oh, Dave. Mentors don't necessarily have to be older, younger, or formal. I mean, the Operation Timothy, I haven't been involved in it yet, but it looks like an amazing program. But it doesn't even have to be formal. I try to get mentorship from everybody that I interact with. And it's really the opposite of like a corporate environment or a chamber of commerce even. Like when I went out on my own, I went to my first chamber of commerce meeting, and everybody's handing out business cards and asking if, what do you do? Can we make a deal? And it felt kind of sleazy. And I went to my first CBMC, and everybody's handing out business cards, and it's like, hey, what do you do? What can I do for you? Can I take you to lunch? I'd like to talk to you about this. And it just was a more wholesome and like genuine feeling in the room than corporate environments, corporate networking events, things like that. And so also, like Dick said, that motivation part, and when I say I mean it specifically, I don't mean like the get up and go and trying to achieve, but my goal went from, he said the word treasure. My goal was make a lot of money, donate a little bit of it, and hope somebody else will do the kingdom work. That's for the holy men at church, right? Mm-hmm. But now my motivation is like all of this is God's anyway. All the skills He gave me, any money that I can make off of it, it comes from God anyway. So I just need to go where He's telling me to go. And the mentorships that I've gotten have really helped push me in that direction.
That's good. Thanks for sharing.
Just one thought on Operation Timothy. As I was going through it, the mentor made it clear to me that I need to grow in my faith, obviously. But he said, you cannot, as you reach out and you become an ambassador for Christ, you cannot take another man further than you've been yourself. Mm-hmm. So we need to stay in the Word and do that. So as you think about Operation Timothy, I thought of it as I needed it because I was a disciple. But there are some of you that are ready to be Pauls here, and I would ask you to think about getting involved from that aspect when you're ready to lead another man that way. So it's a challenge, but it's a rewarding experience.
Thank you guys for sharing. So I'm hearing some of the threads of this next question already in the conversation, but can you share a story about a time recently where your faith was actively at play in your work with either a coworker or a client?
Well, I can't do recently from a coworker
Sure.
because I was retired 31 years now. Yeah. But a couple of examples immediately came to mind as I just stepped out in faith as when Ford sent me back to Michigan in my last job. CBMC was very active in Detroit. They had like 15 committees at that point in time that met weekly. And back then in CBMC, each committee would hold an outreach at least once every 3 months, whatever. So they were very active in outreach. And I had the opportunity to speak at many of those, and I decided that Ford moved me around from component to component, different jobs, that I would invite those people who work for me. I would just tell them, I'm going to speak at a luncheon, I'm going to share what's important to me in my faith, would you be interested in coming? And one day a young man named Jim, others did, one day a young man named Jim said, I want to go with you, I want to hear what you got to say. And that day he prayed to receive Christ into his life. And he was a changed man, and when I would see him in the hall, we would walk up the hall, you know, Jesus is really good to me. And I was like, okay, Jim, okay. But it was about 4 months later, and Ford did a lot of support of the arts and things like that in Detroit, and we sent executives to that, and a couple executives from another division were represented at that fundraiser. And one lady came up to him and said, are you with Ford? Yes. Do you know Dick Fenstermacher? Yes. Oh, he shared into my husband's, like, we have been praying in my Bible study for 7 years for somebody to get in his face and present Christ to him. I see the providence of God in all of that, you know, just by our faithfulness to reach out. It just changed his life, and it was in God's timing. Another example was I was in Detroit, and the CBMC group in Cincinnati said, would you come down and share your testimony? And that was my home base. That's where I developed started my career at Ford, so I knew all of those people, and I knew the dealers there, and I said, I'll come down, but I'll ask that you reach out to the Ford Motor Company, I'll give you the names, and you invite them to the outreach, and the Ford dealers in town, because I know them, I haven't seen them in years. So I went down and shared my testimony, and the next day I was back in Michigan, and one of my buddies, Walt from Cincinnati, called me and he said, Dick, you're not going to believe what they're saying about you here. And I said, what are they saying? And he said, oh, did you hear what Fenstermacher said yesterday? He's a religious nut. He's gone off the wall, you know, stay away from Fenstermacher. He's crazy. I said, and Walt was concerned. I said, oh, Walt, isn't that great? You know, I said, I believe they're under conviction. Along with that, as I've shared, another time I shared in Cincinnati, I invited them to bring all my fraternity brothers. And one of them was one of my closest, and we had roomed together in graduate school, actually. And I shared my testimony, and we had an event that night, and we got together, and he said, Fence, I want to tell you, I heard what you had to say today. And I went home, and I made a platter of cheese and some crackers and some wine, and I sat out on my patio for 2 hours, and I thought about it, and I just can't believe in God. I just can't believe there's a God that did all of this. And I said, Jake, you know, that's fine. You're my friend, you know, just continue. I'm going to pray for you and continue. So anyway, what happened was he got upset about it enough that his wife and my wife are very close, and they just, he made them discontinue a relationship with us for a number of years. And we're supposed to, Jared has talked about it, keep a list in our wallets of men we're praying for and whatever. I put Jake on my list that day, and another fraternity brother. He's still in my wallet today as I've transferred it from, you know, over the years. Still praying for him, for God to call him. So we're going to be rejected. You know, we're going to have issues like that. You know, Christ said, you know, blessed are those who are persecuted for my sake. A quick story. I had to fire a guy in Denver when I was running that division. And he said, well, Jesus said we're going to be persecuted. You're persecuting me. You're firing me. And I said, I don't think you got the real meaning of that. You know, he said, I'm not firing you for Jesus' sake here. I'm firing you for your performance. So anyway, but we are going to face rejection as we go out there, you know, and ridicule at times. So just that's fine. That's, again, the community that we're in. There's, you know, and the encouragement that we get, and we know that we're doing the right thing. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have any like bring people to Jesus moment. Actually, I will tell a quick story. On Father's Day, I baptized my 7 and 5-year-old boys,
Praise God.
and they came to me and said that they wanted to accept Christ into their hearts and to be baptized. And it was really funny because the younger one, Teddy, who Clint is Ted's godfather, so you'll enjoy this. Ted jumped in the pool and said, "Let's go." Like, he jumped in front of a couple hundred people at church and said, I'm ready to go, let's do this. Pastor Frank asked him if he watched Jesus. He said, yes. I dunked him. He's all jazzed about it. I look up, and the pastor that's got Carson staged up, the 7-year-old, he's like, I don't know where he is. Carson took off. He got stage fright. But we managed to step, we told him, we'll wait, everybody will leave, and then we can baptize you, without the huge crowd. All of that to say, that gave all of our friends from church time to get their kids out of their classes, and they came back because his friends wanted to see him get baptized. And little Josie, she's Carson's age, a couple of weeks older than him. That night she said the salvation prayer too, and said she wanted to get baptized because she saw Carson. And so I was like, this dude is 7 years old, and he was actually 6 at the time. He hadn't had his birthday yet. Like, this kid's already brought one more person to Christ than I feel like I have. So he's doing better than me. But all that to say, like I said in the last question, the motivation. I haven't had that moment where I've been able to bring somebody to Christ or encourage them, or maybe I've planted a seed, and I hope I have, but I think the biggest thing for me is that I have changed that motivation from wanting to work for myself to wanting to use my skills for him. So I got a buddy, Matt Clark, he was a youth pastor at Genoa for several years. Now he's at Jersey Church in Pataskala, and he's planting a church in Johnstown. And I knew he was doing that before I went out on my own, and I just thought, once I got to this point with CDMC and all that, I was like, Matt, why don't you just let me help you do your money? So now I'm trying to help him build up the business side of the church and, understand his bookkeeping and all that stuff that you have to have in the background that, pastors don't want to deal with, right? So taking that all back to what Brent said yesterday, and everything that we do should be a form of worship. So I don't have that hey, I brought you to Jesus moment, or use my faith in a specific interaction, but I'm trying to reframe everything to where it's God gave me this, and I can use it as a form of worship and just give it back to God.
Thanks, Chris. Kind of building off that, we've built our business. This is my own business, so I can do what I want and how God directs us, but with faith-based investing. So values-based investing is what we call it, but it really was a conviction upon my heart back in 2015, 2016. And again, started my business 4.5 years ago, so it was a conviction that was building. But seeing that, how do we use work as worship? How do we use our investment dollars as worship? Make the world a better place, investing in products and services that are helping the world become a better place, investing in human flourishing. I've been doing that for Christian clients now for 4.5 years. Just a recent development in the last 3-4 weeks, I realized that the Muslim faith is very similar from a morality perspective. I've been having conversations with my neighbor who's Palestinian Muslim for about 2 years since the attack happened in Israel, and learning a lot about the Muslim faith. And it just was this revelation about a month ago. And so I approached him about values-based investing. Now it's becoming this tool we can implement for our Christian clients, as well as wanting to maybe build relationships with the Muslim community and see where that leads. But it's something that we can apply from the business perspective, and again, thinking about things missionally.